D-Focus Media Production.
Audio Jungle.
What's up, everyone? It's your favorite optometrist, Dr. Daryl Glover.
And I'm Dr. Jennifer Lyerly, resident optometry nerd.
And welcome to D-Focus Media, optometry's #1 podcast, where we discuss the hottest topics, latest technology, eyewear, practice management, and more. So sit back, relax, and D-Focus.
Hello, and welcome to the D-Focus Media Podcast. I'm Dr. Jennifer Lyerly, and I'm excited to be branching out a little bit today. I think you guys know from listening to the show over the last few years that I do a lot of specialty contact lens care, but it is easy to get into your silo in many facets of life, optometry included, and forget about what a wide world of optometry there is and how many different paths your career can take. So I've got expert guests doing things a lot differently for me, and I'm excited to learn from them today. And I know you guys are too, kind of expand our way of thinking about optometry. Please welcome to the show Dr. Virginia Dudani and Dr. Mark Taub.
Hello.
Hey, Jen, how are you?
I'm doing good. So Dr. Taub and I, we go back, he was actually a professor of mine at the Southern College of Optometry. And I know many of you guys listening have probably had the luxury of being educated by him as well. Dr. Taub, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and what you do over at SEO?
Sure. Actually, I'm celebrating my 15th anniversary as of 2 days ago. So it's been a fun 15 years. I'm the chief of the Vision Therapy and Rehabilitation Service, where we work specifically with kids who have learning-related vision problems, tracking, accommodation, amblyopia, those kinds of things. But really, the area that we've kind of expanded significantly has been our brain injury population. There are 5 doctors who are credentialed at 5 rehab facilities and the major trauma center in Memphis, a city of over 1 million people. And we get to see those patients bedside, chairside. I've even seen patients in the bathroom if I've needed to. And then those patients will set the groundwork for them there. Work with the therapists and the doctors, and then we'll see them back at the college, where our 3rd year and 4th year students will get vast experiences working with the VT population.
Well, and not to underwrite this at all, but you also write a little column and review of optometry that is honestly my favorite part of that magazine right now, because it really digs into like the bread and butter of what we do as optometrists, which is refraction. But it also gets sometimes overlooked as we seek to add all of our medical skills. And it's so important to remember, like, we provide refractive care to our patients, and that's what they're counting on us to do first and foremost. So what is writing that column kind of meant to you and your career?
So it was very interesting because I've been writing for Review for a long time. And when they kind of pitched this idea to me, I was like, wow, I need to find somebody who could write this. And at the time, I was talking with Dr. Paul Harris, who I used to write the column with. And he said, well, why don't we do it? I was like, yeah, I guess we could do it. And it's a really neat opportunity because it's, I talk the talk all the time. So now I'm, trying to kind of spread that news and different schools of optometry teach different thought processes, which kind of ties into what we're doing here. And it's for us, it's an extension of what we do every single day. For example, the next column that should be running soon is all about seeing patients who need 2 pairs of glasses or 3 versus a progressive or a bifocal due to a stroke or a neurological issue such as MS. This is kind of common sense, but you get into the weeds of practice, you kind of forget about it sometimes. So just drawing people back to those things that they maybe have forgotten, maybe ignored, maybe whatever, but drawing them back to those kind of core principles on which the first 2 years of their academics was probably founded.
Right. Well, Dr. Donati, before we started recording, I was sharing with you where, I'm like blown away by all the things that you're spearheading and accomplishing right now. You work at Bolton Optometry in Ontario, and you really specialize in vision therapy there. You're a fellow of COVD, and then you also really spearheaded a lot of the Canadian vision therapy programs. So you mind sharing a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thanks for having me here today. I graduated in class of '06, Pennsylvania College of Optometry, which is now Salus University. And, vision therapy was something I knew for sure that I wanted to do once I graduated. I was actually a vision therapy patient myself throughout optometry school. And I really do credit that for allowing me to graduate. I really don't know that I would have made it through the program without vision therapy really kind of pulling me out of the gigantic visual funk that I was in. I'll put it that way and spare you the details. But it was something that when I came back to Canada, I wanted to make sure it was something that I did. And it was kind of bummed out when I got back and started looking around for jobs and asking, does anyone do vision therapy that I can join? And it was kind of a shh, don't ask that. That's not the kind of thing you want to stick your neck out for. So, I found a couple of practices that were kind of willing to at least let me do it as long as I didn't make too much noise. And so it kind of started as me just doing a patient or two in my exam room, just with what little equipment I had purchased from our school's, bookstore, what was necessary for our labs for school, and kind of going from there. But I was actually at a CE event presented by Dr. Glenn Steele at very close to my home on retinoscopy. And a bunch of us just kind of got together and said, why isn't this a thing? Why does the US have an advocacy group dedicated to vision therapy and we don't? And why isn't it something that's spoken about more? Why is it in the shadows? Why is it not people screaming from the rooftops about how much this can benefit patients? So we just started one. And so I was the founding vice president of what was then the Canadian Optometrists in Vision Therapy and Rehabilitation, which was renamed, because that is way too much to say, to Vision Therapy Canada. I was the president for 3 years and now the immediate past president. So I'm also involved with running the Practical Vision Therapist Accreditation Program, the PVTAP program here in Canada, which is more geared toward training of vision therapists. But a lot of our ODs that are just kind of wanting to dip their toe into the water on VT are now kind of finding the program and getting involved with it as well. So it's been really great to see vision therapy blossom and make noise about it, because it's something that really deserves more noise.
Well, we're about to give it some noise today. That's our whole goal on this show, right? And I want to kind of kick everything off by just asking you guys as the experts, what is behavioral optometry? How would you define that? And what are kind of the core philosophies that make that different than what the everyday optometry many of us are getting from optometry school?
I'll let you take that one, Virginia.
Okay, sure. So, it's funny to hear someone say, what is behavioral optometry? Because it's optometry. It's just optometry. It's the same optometry that we all learned in optometry school. I think one of the biggest differences, if I could even call it a difference, is the concept of looking at your patient as an individual, as a person, as a human, and saying, what are your visual needs and what are you doing with your visual process right now? And I think we kind of all learn a little bit about this in optometry school, just hearing, even when Dr. Taub was saying, patients that need more than one pair of glasses because of whatever their specific visual needs are. Behavioral optometry is more looking at exactly what are you doing in your day-to-day life that is visually demanding, and is your visual process up to snuff for what you are demanding of it? And if not, what is that doing to you? What problems might that be causing? And how can we intervene to make sure that you are not only comfortable, but that you're not doing yourself any damage or harm? And how can we fix that if that is the case? So it's really kind of just delving into the person, particularly looking at what their ocular examination is telling you, and then how can we help?
Yeah, I kind of I love the concept of the demand, and acting to prevent is is the core of what optometry does. And as you were saying that, I kind of thought about all of what's going on now with myopia control. So we're working so hard to prevent myopia from occurring, but we're kind of behavioral optometry, and I hate that term, because it's there really isn't a difference. I guess if there was a difference, I would say it's more of a functional look versus a structural look. Looking at myopia as the rays of light do this and do that, versus how is the brain interpreting the signal? How is it the input, the output? And in myopia control, we're working on preventing myopia, but in vision therapy, we're working on preventing further stress from impacting the visual system, impacting the body. So I guess the other way I look at it is behavioral optometry is a brain-centered eye approach. Obviously the eyes are attached to the brain through that little nerve, but the tactile input, the auditory input, all of the other different senses go into to make what we interpret and then spit back out again through motor, in the motor system. So it's a body approach versus just an eyeball approach.
I think when you guys are sharing these definitions, one of the first thing that comes to mind is, and I see this happen with optometrists all the time. You have a child in your chair. They do everything fine on all of your tests. Structurally, the eye looks healthy. They read the letters on the chart. You're not really finding any sort of prescription, but they have XXX complaints. And we say, oh, they're malingering. Mom and dad, they just want glasses. And that's kind of a default thing that many optometrists will swing to. But we're missing maybe some of those functional assessment tests that would show us where the problem's really coming from. And so many of those kids that you're maybe calling malingerers actually do have something going on that's making it extremely difficult for them to perform their daily needs and tasks. And that's where this approach would kind of differentiate versus everything looks fine in these retinal photos we took.
It's very much, forgive me, Virginia, it's very much imagine somebody came into your office complaining of a headache, and you just check the visual system and you're like, no, there's nothing going on. Okay, you're done now. Imagine a patient coming in complaining of, blurry vision when reading, trouble with reading below grade level, not doing very well in school. And you're like, oh, visually you're fine. But you have to go that next step. You have to find out the why of why they're having trouble, instead of just kind of dismissing them as, it's just not important. I have my next patient. You're really doing a disservice to the patient and to the parents and the caregivers by not, doing what you're supposed to be doing as optometrists and digging further.
Well, let's talk about what the equipment or the testing you may need to try to take those next steps above and beyond to try to find out what's causing these underlying problems for our patients who have complaints that we're not detecting maybe on a traditional examination. Are there pieces of equipment or tests that you guys find most fruitful in your practices?
I would say, as far as pieces of equipment, not really. I mean, we have all the tools, the actual tools that we need. If we're talking about examinations, I might prefer a different fixation target than what I learned in optometry school. I might now do base outs and base in ranges a little bit differently than I did in optometry school in terms of order. But, as far as the actual toys, that's really not the issue. Really the biggest thing that you need to remember is what is the chief complaint here? And, this is kind of going back to what Mark was saying as well, is that we do our patients a disservice when we don't dig a little deeper. And there's so many visual problems that our patients can experience that they actually have absolutely no idea are visual. So, when I say to a patient, if I'm doing a pursuit test and just watching them track a target, and then I say to them, hey, do you ever find that when you're reading, you skip lines or reread the same line over and over again, or get to the end of the page and not remember what you read? Or do you find that the words kind of swim or move around on the page, or that you fall asleep after you've been reading for a little while, or start to get anxious or grumpy after you've been reading for a little while? And they're like, oh my God, that's an eyeball thing? It's like, yes, that's an eyeball thing. That's a vision thing. And yes, we can help with that. So our patients may not necessarily complain about those things. And so if we don't investigate, if we don't look and see what these potential issues might be, they're going to go home and they're going to think, I just suck at reading, or I just am not a good student, or I'm just not very clever, or, whatever things that we tell ourselves about our poor performance. These are patients who are going to go their whole lives, potentially their whole lives, not knowing that they have these visual problems. So you don't need special equipment, to actually do vision therapy. Yeah, there's some things that will make your life a little bit easier, but you don't need to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on special things to do that. You can do a lot of effective vision therapy with very, very minimal equipment and spend very little money.
I agree with everything she said.
Well, I hate to, you mentioned Virginses during your discussion, and I am guessing that the majority of our practitioners on a traditional eye exam are not performing Virginses at all. Obviously, I think EOMs is a pretty high hit rate, but many doctors have staff members performing that part when you kind of start talking about things. And like a traditional workup, if you want to find these patients that need your help, do you have a certain thing where you're like, I highly recommend, just as an overarching view, you as a doctor should be doing EOM, cover test, accommodative tests? What's some of your quick hit list, basically?
You can go first on that, Mark. How about that?
Sure. I'm a little bit different because I'm working with students. So, a traditional office may have, a technician or two, or a vision therapist or two. I've got 270 vision therapists and technicians. So it's a little bit different. But things that obviously you need to do your chair skills, doing the cover test at distance and near, doing the EOMs, doing an NPC, not just one time, but 3 or 4 times is crucial. I'm huge on stereo testing. I don't care which book you use. You could use the traditional Randot. You could use whichever. It doesn't really matter. But something that's got fine gradations, not just kind of the global shapes. I prefer to have a checklist, a symptom survey checklist done. It helps me connect the student to what they're seeing in their exam data, but it also helps the parent and the child, like Virginia was saying, and I've had many of those moments too, Virginia, where you look at the checklist, you look at the data, and you're like, the same questions, and the kid is just like, how did you know that? I mean, you ask these questions knowing that's going to be the response, but the checklist also helps me determine what problem-based exam I'm going to give. I don't do the same exam on everybody. Traditionally, and there are still optometrists who do it, who will do what's known as the 21-point exam, the OEP 21-point exam. Given that I'm an educator, I need to be a little more problem-based and focus-based. And the history and the checklist let me do that. That lets me know, am I going to need to dig further in this direction or this direction? Am I going to need to break out a reading eye movement test to help kind of make the point and see what's going on in that direction? But I'm very problem focused in my exam.
Thank you. I mean, I think that gives people a really clear cut, like, if I'm not doing these tests or if I'm someone else outsourcing it, maybe time to rethink that a little bit if I want to find some of these patients.
And I will say, one thing that Virginia was talking about virgins ranges. it's kind of funny because I've been doing, I graduated in '01, so I'm a little bit older than Virginia. Um, but, over the last 5 years or so, I would say that the amount of time that I actually use the phoropter has decreased to, if I have 10 patients, maybe I'll use the phoropter for one. I've noticed a significant difference in my retinoscopy findings in and out of the phoropter. Just having that, kind of artificial environment of the phoropter behind is a huge difference. So I actually do retinoscopy on most of my patients outside of the phoropter just with loose lenses,
Mhm.
which is how they do it in 95% of the world, by the way.
Very true. I mean, I would just add, as far as kind of go-to tests to add in, I think that we all kind of get into an autopilot habit. You've been out of optometry school for a certain amount of time, and there are just some tests that seem to just magically disappear off of our repertoire, and that we don't really break them out anymore. But I would say, especially for your patients who are school age, things that I do 100% of the time on every school age patient that maybe other people might have dropped by now, are my NRA PRA findings, which, if you're Canadian, you probably know them as BMA BPA, and my fused cross cylinder testing, or BCC if you're Canadian. So those kind of tests are going to give me a lot of information as to how the patient is kind of interacting with their near space right now, and how in trouble they might be, how stressed they might be, how much visual strain they're actually experiencing, as well as having a good near card. I know this seems silly, but having just a near point card that a young child can actually read, so that's reasonable in terms of grade level, and just have them read it. So don't have them cover up an eye and read 2-3 words and then move. Actually, just stop, give them the card, let them read it, and just listen and watch and see what you see, because you might find that all of a sudden they stick their nose right down on top of the card, or they might turn their head and look at it, or they might close an eye. They might grit their teeth and their whole face turns red and their eyebrows go down. And I mean, that's a kid in trouble. I don't care if they can see 20/20 or 0.4 m. There's something going on there. And so that's going to prompt me to dig a little bit deeper and maybe do a little bit more of those tests that wouldn't have necessarily been done otherwise. So, I mean, best piece of advice, even if you do nothing else, just try that. Give them the near card and just let them go and see what happens. And you might hear mom in the background going, oh yeah, she has a little trouble reading, or yeah, this part's a little bit hard for her. And it's like, all right, let's have a conversation now, because you didn't write that in the history. So let's talk a little bit more about that and what's going on in an academic environment.
That's awesome advice.
Yeah, and knowing the academics is so important, and not necessarily. I've also grown less trustful of children's responses, and where you say to the child, "Well, how's school going?" and they're like, "Oh, I'm doing great," and then you look back and mom is like, "No, that's not happening." So I always will ask about academic history, and specifically what subjects are going well and poorly. Oh, I'm doing okay in science, but reading and English, it's not going so well. Well, why is it not going so well? Well, I know I don't finish my assignments in time. Go dig further. Those are, that's a launching point.
One of the things you mentioned earlier, Dr. Taub, was headaches as an example of where I cannot, especially since the pandemic, the number of patients that come to my office with the complaint of headaches is at minimum 50% of everybody on my schedule that day, right? And most of the time, our normal testing is not showing any health problems that would cause a headache. I'm not seeing 50% of my patients with swollen optic nerves, but that doesn't negate the fact that they're extremely uncomfortable. What would be a behavioral optometry approach to a patient complaining of headaches that might help our patients a little bit better than what most of us are traditionally doing, which is like, oh, next step's going to be scheduling with your PCP?
So I'll set it up. I'll set the ball on the tee, and then I'm going to let Virginia knock it out. So it's interesting you say that, because I just got a little notice of a study that was done over the pandemic, and it was 110 kids, and excluding any ocular disease, systemic disease, and they were using something called the CISS, the Convergence Insufficiency Symptom Survey, and pandemic numbers were approximately, the survey was 5, and then it doubled to almost about 9.5 to 10 just within the first certain time period of the pandemic. So yes, we're definitely seeing many more patients with those symptoms, and right now we went from full lockdown to, obviously kind of this mixture back and forth. But we're definitely still seeing those patients. And I'm gonna hand it over to Virginia for the second part. But your question is so timely, because I literally just opened up an email and saw those results this morning.
I would say that, getting back to your original question, what's the behavioral optometry approach? Well, what's the optometry approach, right? Of course, we're going to rule out pathology. We have to do that. We want to make sure that all of the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. But this is then a good opportunity to kind of get into, what does your day look like? What are you doing? Okay, where is school? Is school in your living room, or is school at school? Okay, and if school is at home, what are you doing school on? Okay, are we on a desktop computer? Are we on a laptop computer? Are you on a tablet? Are you on your phone? Are you on mom's phone? And what kind of environment is this happening in? I have some patients who tell me that, mom has a laptop and brother is using the tablet, and so I get to use mom's phone for school all day. And we're talking about, this little tiny screen that the child is now having to do all of their assignments on. And I have to try and color in the little tabs on my worksheets on Google Stream or Google Paint or whatever the heck it is that they're using. I don't know. I don't do this stuff. But my point is that they're kind of doing all of this little tiny detail work for many hours a day on a very small device. So yes, we can certainly then do all of our examination, make sure that we don't have any signs of ESO or any accommodative spasm. And any of those kinds of things that we might traditionally think of as causing things like eye strain or headaches. Get the patient in a near point plus lens if that is something that is going to be reasonable for them and for the results that you find. But then talk about the habits. So if you're doing school on a phone, can you do it on a tablet? Can you do it on a laptop? Can you do it on a desktop? Even better, do you have the option of going in person? Because it seems like this at-home thing is maybe not the best for you in terms of your health. So are there other options? As far as recreation goes, when you take a break from school, what are you doing? Okay. Is a break from school like, okay, now I'm going to get off my Google Meet and I go on to Minecraft for the next 3 hours or whatever game is. So is your recreational time also a break for your eyeballs, or is it just a brain break? Because there's a difference between a brain break and an eye break. So we need to make sure that you are actually disengaging from the screen completely and going to do something else. Go play outside. Go, guess what shapes the clouds look like, or take the dog for a walk, or, whatever the case may be. Do something else that's not looking at the same point in space for even longer in time. So kind of getting to the root of the patient's day to day and what might be triggering those headaches are going to be really important as well. And the appropriate amount of near point plus.
Do you find that certain headache locations trigger an idea of you of like, ooh, the problem is most likely this, like a frontal headache versus a temporal headache versus a headache behind the eyes? Or does that seem like it maybe doesn't necessarily a headache location relate to headache cause?
I mean, obviously the migraine is a kind of a little bit of a different beast, but I've known patients that their migraines were triggered by visual stress. So headaches, whether they're temporal in the temple area, but also in the back of the neck, just getting closer and spending all of their time sitting like this. Sorry, my head's getting a little big here. But all this time, and tension headaches. So the plus at near is I almost kind of think of it as a tea kettle. You pop the top of the tea kettle to reduce some of that buildup of the steam and release it. And that's kind of what I when I'm talking to my students, that's what I talk about for near point plus. You're reducing that point where you have to pop the top. You're from a structural standpoint, think of it that way. There's this mismatch between accommodation and where your eyes are pointed, and there's this little bit of mismatch, and that plus at near kind of helps to kind of bring them back together again. And I think that's where some of the visual stress occurs. There's this fighting back and forth, and the plus just kind of seems to calm everything down and take a little bit of pressure off of the system. All of the data that you have, keep in mind that, yes, we teach, you're taught, convergence insufficiency is X, Y, and Z. An accommodative insufficiency is X, Y, and Z. But most of the time, that's not really how it happens in real practice. So the use of plus, and I'll say the one other thing is near point retinoscopy is a crucial technique. Whether you choose to do just look retinoscopy that Dr. Steele kind of brought forward, or MEM retinoscopy, or a fused cross cylinder, or just pick whatever exam data points you want to collect and learn to interpret them versus what the rest of the data is showing, which includes refraction.
Do you do a lot of trial framing in your practice? Yeah, I figured the answer was going to be yes, so I wanted to give you the opportunity.
I don't even do trial framing. I will do trial framing and bring them. Obviously, you've been to the college. I'll bring them out into the hallway on a routine basis and put the glasses on them in front of them. Anything for distance. I think the trial framing is if you're going to make even a small change, you're going to show plus at near. You're going to show an appropriately reduced distance prescription versus over minusing. Bring them into the hallway, show them what it's going to look like. It's kind of important to get their buy-in and get their, not only their verbal response, but their body response. Is their posture better? Are they not, down on the near card like they were before? Are they reading more fluently? Is their stereopsis, did it go from 70 to 30 instantaneously? On the ESO posture, if there's ESO and now all of a sudden they're a little bit exo or back to ortho, all of these things are things that, going back to the column that we've all written about. These are all signs that near point lenses are going to be beneficial.
I'll add something else there, and not to play devil's advocate, because that I don't trial frame a lot, but I would say there are going to be certainly occasions where I know that the plus lens is going to be valuable for this patient. I just know it is, based on their complaints, based on the numbers, based on whatever data points I've collected. And sometimes I've kind of put the flipper in front of that patient and had them read something, and they're like, it's the same. And it's like, well, maybe it's the same in the 2 seconds you've been looking at it, but I know that this is going to be valuable for you in the long term. The more you wear it, the more benefit you're going to get. So in some cases, I'm uncomfortable trialing it just because I don't want them to think in their head, well, I looked at it and I didn't see any difference, so I'm not going to bother getting those glasses. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to walk a fine line a little bit. Absolutely. As to, yes, I want to make sure that they can see benefit when there is benefit, but I also don't want them to get into this kind of false sense that it's not necessary. So I always make sure that I tell patients, for near point plus, you're not necessarily going to see a huge difference in clarity here. Okay, this is not to make your eyesight clearer, because your eyesight is already clear. You're already seeing 20/20. I'm not worried about you being 20/20 or less than. What I want to make sure of is that, you're telling me that after you've been doing your homework for half an hour, you're getting a headache. If you wear these glasses before you start your homework, you're not going to get headaches after 30 minutes. And maybe you're going to get headaches after an hour and a half, but maybe that's your time to take a break anyway. So I just want to kind of feed them the understanding that this is for their benefit, not just to make their eyesight better, because we're kind of cued to glasses, putting them on and having that, wow, I see so much better. And that's not necessarily going to be the case for your near point lenses.
100% agree. 100%.
For a doctor who's starting to have this mindset of prescribing plus in these situations, what would be some of the things you'd be looking for to feel confident that this prescription is going to be helpful to your patients? I think Dr. Taub, you mentioned like maybe a cover test with the plus on and seeing a change to ortho or exo posture, for example. Or is there anything else we should look for to feel confident, like this plus lens I'm prescribing, you don't really feel a difference yet, but I know it's doing something?
For me, stereopsis is stereo is crucial. Repetition with the NPC, if it was reduced before and all of a sudden even a little bit of an improvement is kind of important. One thing that kind of also shows me, and we have these occasionally, is the patient will come in and they see 20/20, but you do a distance scope and all of a sudden they're scoping a little bit of minus at distance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is like, red flag. Do not give that minus or you are going to cause more problem. I mean, I'm not saying that the person's a -2, but a small little bit of minus, especially with a little bit of cylinder, either at 90 or 180. And if you end up prescribing that, you're kind of leading the patient down a bad path.
Yeah, and the flip side of that as well, the patient who comes in with complaints of blurry vision at distance and then rhymes off the 20/20 line, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are patients who we see all the time, and we have no problems telling the parent they're not blurry, they're 20/20, they're fine. You can go home now. And yet, did we check any of the near point stuff, any of the near point measurements? Because dollars to donuts, if you had done an accommodative facility on that patient, or if you had done an accommodative lag on that patient, you probably would have found a lead, or you probably would have found a patient who's not able to tolerate that facility testing, monocular or binocular. So when you have that patient who says they have blurry vision and yet they read 20/20, they're not lying to you. Okay. So in my practice, this is not a malingerer. This is someone who has a near point problem until proven otherwise. Right. And if I really, really don't find anything, then I might say, hey, did your best friend get glasses lately? Or, little sister get glasses, or something that might trigger that patient to be wanting glasses, because it's not as common as we think for patients to try to lie to get glasses. If they're complaining about blurry vision somewhere, it really is our duty to listen to them and find out why and where that's coming from.
Just like an amblyopia is a diagnosis of exclusion, so is malingering. More often it's a stress reaction, you may know as Streff syndrome, or conversion disorder. I've heard it before. There are lots of different names for it, but there's a real thing going on here. It's not necessarily that the patient is just like, I want glasses. My buddy got glasses. There are those, but maybe I see maybe half a dozen a year at most. It's more common to be the real deal.
Absolutely. Well, I think a lot of people listening to this conversation are, hopefully going to go back to their practices and rethink maybe some of the approaches they're taking to patients with these common complaints. But I also realizing there's a lot more that I could learn and really adopt this as a core practice philosophy for how I approach patient care. So do you have any recommendations of where to go to learn more, resources, journals to read?
I'll take the journals to read if you want to take the organizations, Virginia.
Sure.
And I say that with all humility. I'm the editor of Optometry and Visual Performance. It is the journal for the Optometric Education Extension Program Foundation, OEP. OEP has been around for, I think, close to 90 something years now. And the core goal of the organization is education. So the journal, this is the second journal that we've had. The first one published for about 23 years, and it is an open access journal, OVP, and it is supported by the organization. But really, the goal is education. We publish articles like on pretty much anything related to visual performance, pediatrics, low vision, vision therapy, vision rehab, research, case reports, literature reviews, book reviews, article reviews, pretty much anything. And that actually is open online, and you can actually find that. There's a link if you go to the OEP webpage, oepf.org, and you can actually get access to the journal, the new issues, but then also the 23 years of the previous journal as well. So overall, it's close to 33 years worth of articles, probably over several hundred, and they're darn good. It's darn good stuff, and I'm saying that with full bias.
And to add, of course, on the OEP website, there's also full libraries worth of books. If books are your thing, there are books on every conceivable topic related to the behavioral approach to optometry, vision therapy, and rehab. So certainly check that out as well. But OEP also offers curriculum courses. So if you are the kind of person who, I don't want to learn this on my own, I don't want to read it, I want to sit and hear it, I want someone to teach me, you can certainly check out the introductory course, which is offered by OEPF, the Art and Science of Optometric Care Behavioral Perspective, one of which I'm an instructor. So I'll add a little plug for that there. But then there's VT1, VT2, VT3, which a lot of people are kind of familiar with as to kind of really get the nuts and bolts of how to provide vision therapy within an optometric setting. For Canadians out there, the Vision Therapy Canada website, you can become a member. There are lots of online resources there as well, previously published studies, not necessarily OVP studies, but all studies everywhere. So you can check that out as well. Certainly there are a lot of conferences on a yearly basis, both offered by Vision Therapy Canada and by COVD. Their conference is yearly as well, usually in April. So you can certainly register there, become members of these organizations, because these organizations really do use that kind of sense of community to build, what do you want to learn about in the future? We need to hear from everybody to know what topics are really desired. We have a study group coming up. It's a virtual study group, so you can check out the Vision Therapy Canada website. Beginning of March, we are doing an introductory for optometrists who really don't know a lot about behavioral optometry or VT in general and are looking to kind of really just dip their toe in and get started and think, is this even something I'm interested in? Do I actually want it to kind of learn more? And, generally speaking, I would encourage everyone, even if you hate BV and even if you hate vision therapy, I don't like seeing kids, I don't want anything to do with this stuff, that's fine. I would say the same thing about dry eye. That is not my thing. But I am absolutely the first one to refer a patient with dry eye. If I give you a bottle of eye drops and it doesn't help, I'm out. I got no other tricks. So I'm absolutely very, very keen to refer those patients on. And I think that if nothing else, we can at least help our patients by referring to those who do this every day and who can really make a difference. And the patients do appreciate it. They really, really love when we have kind of gone and said, you know what, I'm seeing something here. This is not my thing, but I know someone great and I can refer you on and make sure that you get the best care possible because your eye health and your eye care is important to me. And they always appreciate that.
And Virginia, you told me you said a little bit about your kind of journey to VT, but mine was exactly what you just said. I was in first grade, and my regular eye doctor identified the issue and got me to a guy by the name of Elliot Forrest, who you know of, and I did vision therapy, and I credit him with him and the next doctor with rehabilitating and habilitating my system that I could deal with everything. And that's, one of my ways of paying homage to those two gentlemen, Elliot Forrest and Dr. Joel Warshawski, is doing this and teaching more. I always tell my students, I know I'm not naive. I've got 135 students in each class. And if I get between 5 and 10 of them interested in vision therapy, I consider that a success. But I'm a better success if I get the other 125 to acknowledge that these problems exist, to know how to identify them, know what the treatment options are, and then find somebody using if they know somebody in their class, somebody in their area, checking the OEPF doctor locator. COVD has a doctor locator. The Neuro-Optometric Rehab Association, the Sports Association, ISVA, has doctor locators all over the world. So, but if there are no doctors in your area, you could reach out to either Virginia and I, and we'll do our best to find you somebody, or help you, on different treatment options. Let us be resources for you.
Would you guys mind sharing contact information in case someone needs to call upon your help?
Absolutely, not a problem.
Do you want to give your email address?
Verbally? Okay, it's Dr. Donati, so DRDONATI at boltonoptometry.ca. Bolton is BOLTON.
And I can give you my Gmail address. It's ovp.editor@gmail.com.
Thank you guys both so much. Learning a lot as always whenever we sit down together, Dr. Taub. And it was really nice to speak with you today, Dr. Donati. And like I said, I think behavioral optometry, my takeaway is it is optometry. It's how we should think about addressing and approaching our patients. And most of us are doing it without really realizing that we have that label on it, but embracing it more in those situations where we're quick to dismiss or maybe send a patient away to thinking, oh, eyes are fine. There might be a lot more that we could do. So hopefully this podcast helps reinvigorate your approach to that. Thanks again so much, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
All right, colleagues, and it's a wrap. Thank you dearly for hanging out with the Defocus Media team. We hope truly something resonated with you. And if it did, be sure to give us 5 stars and make sure you follow us on all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it. And our handle is at Defocus Media on all platforms. And until next time, be sure to keep it 2020, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.